are you, Dora?
I'm doing well. So, Jen, I had this student ask me about, we were talking about, we were in a book club actually, and there were some topics that we were talking about. And then one student asked about regret. So he asked about, how do we deal with regret when it comes to maybe you have done something in the past to someone that may have been hurtful or that you regret, and that you perhaps believe that you've affected that person in a negative way and not feeling too good about that, obviously. Um, what can one do about regret? What are your thoughts? I know it's kind of a deep topic here that I just kind of threw at you, but here you go.
I think what comes to mind is, a lot of the things that have popped up around regret have been around for me as people age. So, and I took that course related to end of life doulas. And, I really learned a lot, especially, I lost my dad. Like it's been a while, like 10 years ago. But at that time, I really wasn't prepared. And I don't know if anybody ever really is, but I really had no preparation around death. And I kind of wished I knew what I know now. But specifically around regret, it was about, it was when people get older, it's this regret of, not doing what they wanted to do or wish they could have done, or not saying what they wanted to do. And in the doulist training, they talked about, if that person at the end of life, it might even be part of their transition, being able to just tell someone they feel comfortable with. Doesn't even have to be a family member. These things, that they wanted to say to somebody they loved or never got to say, or share their wishes. So that really comes to mind when I think of regret.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like, I mean, regret obviously has to do with something that happened in the past that one perceives that they cannot change it now, right? That they feel like, oh, if only I could go back in time, then I would have done things differently. And I think that is a really interesting one because, of course, with the knowledge and experience that you have in this present moment, it's much easier for us to judge ourselves back then and say, oh, I should have done this, should have done that, because in hindsight, right? Because you've now lived it and experienced the outcome, how things turned out. You have a lot more information now. So, of course, you could, can say, oh, if I didn't do this or if I did that, things would have turned out differently. But you can say that with everything, right? Whatever you do differently, you'll get a different outcome. So, yes, if you could go back in time and do it differently, your outcome would be different. But also, we don't know whether the outcome is going to be better or worse than what you're feeling now. So that's one point that I wanted to say. And the second point is that, and this comes to mind, one of our teachers, Dr. Richard Miller's favorite sayings is that we are always doing the best we know how in every moment. So understanding that back then, with less information than we had now, less experience than we have now, maybe we should show ourselves also a little bit more compassion in that, well, whatever we did, even though it may not be the way we would have handled things now, in that moment, that was the best that we knew how to handle that situation. And so maybe that might be helpful for us to, not judge ourselves so harshly in that moment. There was actually nothing you could have done differently because that was your best. And it's not to say that, oh, that was your best and let's forget about it. Like, don't feel bad about anything. But it's more about, whatever you've done in that moment, you can't change it because it's in the past. But we can use that information and see how that might be helpful for us moving forward. So one of the things could be that, okay, let's not do that again. So we learn from our experience. It could also be that, okay, there's something I need to do, even in this moment, because sometimes we may have done something in the past. We may not be very proud of ourselves, and we may be pushing that thought away for the longest time, but feeling bad about it. So it's like, oh, I don't want to think about that because it makes me uncomfortable, or it's hurtful, or it reminds me of this friend that I lost, or because things went went south between us, right? And so we kind of push away a lot of our feelings. But if we're able to be with it and say, okay, that's what happened, can I be with it? Then maybe there's new information and insight that comes through for us and go, actually, there's something you can do now in regards to that situation. So maybe there are some things that feel unresolved and unfinished. And if we're able to be with what needs to be, because things, as we know, things show up for us as pointers to guide us back towards ourselves. So if there's regret that is very strongly playing out for you in your life, maybe we should look at that, sit with that. What is it trying to tell us as a messenger? And maybe it will reveal to us that there's actually more that you need to do. Maybe there's actually something you need to do. And take those actions if there are actions to be taken. But then also being conscious as to, when are you using that past information in a constructive way to help guide you to live your life going forward? Or are you dwelling in the past, wishing, wishing, wishing that things would be different? Because that is something that we cannot change, is we cannot change the past, but we can change how we experience the past. That's something we can change. So even if your past experience was that, oh, this is a really bad experience, we can change our perspective and start to be open to a different experience, even when we were to remember what happened. So we can change our experience. We can change how we live our life going forward. We can change so many things in the present moment, even though we can't change the past itself. There's more I would love to share, but I would like to just stop here and hear what you have to say.
Yeah, just as you were sharing that, it was making me also, kind of think when the person's regretting, and then, maybe they're thinking, okay, well, I don't want to miss out on anything. So I don't know if that's right either, going forward. And then they think like, oh, well, my parents, have all these regrets. So I'm not going to have those regrets. I'm going to, go everywhere that I want to go and spend all the money and spend all the time doing this. And I don't know if that's good either, So maybe just think about like when that sort of emotion or thought arises, just taking a moment to be with it, like you were saying, right? And maybe it's a pointer as to, maybe there's nothing that needs to be done either. Like maybe it's just something that's residual that's come up, and doesn't mean that you've got to like blow your life savings to go travel all over the world, but just noticing like, was there something that has a little bit of residue, and maybe just noticing it. And you don't maybe even need to take any action, about the past or about the future, but just giving it some space, maybe in an irest practice, or maybe while you're conscious, if you're able to just be with it when it comes up, whenever in life. And then just notice, like we always say, just as it dissipates on its own, and then maybe some residue, it takes a few more times of it coming up and going away on its own, for it to no longer be a regret, perhaps.
Yeah, and that's a really good point you just mentioned, is that, oh, what if people are have that experience with their parents and they're like, I'm not going to live in regret. So, but that's not actually the issue, because at the end of their life they might be regretting that they blew their savings, right? So it's not that you can get away from regret, but because if you don't take that time to be with it, you don't know what you're running away from. And you might think you're running away or moving away from what you don't want, and in fact you might be creating it in a different way. And so I think what you said was really important, in that it's not just about, oh, I'm just going to do the opposite to someone else, because in the end you need to be really clear on what it is that you need and what you are running away from. And because what you're running away from ultimately I think are the things you're going to regret later on, because they're not things we actually sat with, and we may have lived our lives in a very different way, run by our fears, because that's what's really happening. I'm so fearful of this happening, I'm not going to let it happen, right? And so I think that a lot, at least personally, it's when we let fear guide us, that's when we start to act in ways where we can actually regret about that later on, because you're not coming from your true authentic self. And I think that is probably the biggest regret. Maybe ultimately that is the regret, is that we're not showing up as ourselves. We're letting others dictate how we should be in the world. And I think, and regret can show up in many ways. Like you say, for some people, it might be going on adventures and everything. And for other people, it could be that, it's the complete opposite that they're regretting. So there's not one thing that is universal. But I think that if there is an underlying theme to it all, is that we all want to be loved and accepted as we are. And so when we feel that we did not live our life authentically, then whatever actions that we took that took us away from our authenticity, I think that is where the regret is coming from.
Yeah, I agree. As you were speaking, it made me also think that, so what you were saying with regret, it might be the regret of realizing we didn't take right action. So we might have reacted rather than respond in a situation. Um, and in that moment, just needing more compassion, because it's not like we need to really be angry with that person, because that person did do the best they could at that moment, and then now that we know better, and we know that we can choose differently, if that same situation came up, or a similar one, maybe we can respond differently, right? In a way that doesn't bring regret, that really brings that, we're doing our best. And you can feel that even if it's not the best choice either, right? It's this feeling that, you've taken the moment to be with a situation, and then been able to choose, beyond fear, in a way that's loving, right? Loving, and in response to a situation rather than a reaction to a situation.
Yeah. And another thing that I wanted to say about this is that we regret perhaps because we think that if things were different, things would be better. And that's something that I, had to go through my journey to realize that, whatever we think might be better, it's just that. It's what we think might be better. It's our imagination. And we can imagine all we want, and we can imagine that, the grass is greener on the other side, but it never really is, because you'll be always looking at the next field that, and that's greener over there and over there and over there, because whatever we imagine, we're imagining a situation that is better than what we're feeling now, which is just, it's not the reality.
Just a
And so
label.
yeah, if we were to go back in time and change whatever we thought, sure, there might be certain aspects that we think that, I'll get this and I'll get that. But then does it mean we'll be happier? Maybe we'll be dreaming for the life that we're living now, if we were to live that life that we, imagine for ourselves, because there's so much that's happening in our lives. And so for people who may be struggling with finances, their imaginary reality would be, if only I did this, and then I'd be financially stable and I'd be happy, right? And then for those who are financially stable, they might think, if only I had worked less, then my relationship with my kids would have been better, because now it's horrible and I would give anything to change that. And so I think that um, there's a balance in life. We have so much that we can be grateful for, and we also have so much that we are challenged with. And that's what we need in our lives, is that we have that um, love and support, and we have that challenge as well. We need both. And whatever you're challenged with now, we tend to imagine that if I have that, then all my problems will be over. And I have to keep reminding myself that, when I have those moments of imagination, I'm like, wonderful, let me just dream for this moment. But then also wake up and realize that I will always have challenges, no matter what situation I find myself in. And the point in life, perhaps, is not about getting away from challenges, because it's not going to happen. You'll always have challenges, they'll just change forms. So quit wishing that if you had this, you'll be okay. Because once you have that, there'll be something else that you'll be challenged with. And that's okay. And that's actually very beautiful, because it continues to help us to evolve. And so with that, then it helps me to not get too stuck on the idea that, oh, if I change my past, my present moment would be so much better. It wouldn't be so much better. It would just be different. And so then there's not this wish that, oh, my life is over because I made a wrong decision back then. It's that my life is how it's supposed to be. It's unfolded exactly as it's meant to have unfolded. And that whatever changes or imaginations I have around my situation, I'll probably still be at the same level of contentment or discontentment, depending on my perspective. So it's not so much the situation in itself, it's about my perspective and my perception. So if that's where my happiness and my contentment is coming from, well, that's really hopeful, because while I can't change the past, I can change how I perceive myself in the world.
Yeah, you're making me think of maybe a tip. So I was going to say, I don't know if this exactly goes with it, but as you were sharing that, I was thinking a tip would be maybe feeling into and playing with the whole idea of heartfelt desire and heartfelt purpose, the why in the world. So as we're clear, more and more clear about what that might be, and living life to the fullest to that purpose, um, maybe the regret, might lessen, or when it appears, we can hold space for it more. So, as we're living life to whatever that is, maybe it's to bring unconditional joy or be a source of unconditional love, or being just parenting, that's fantastic. Like whatever it is for that person that they feel is their heartfelt contribution, um, maybe feeling into that, and then noticing, as you align your intentions to that heartfelt purpose moment to moment and in your waking days, I wonder if regret would pop up as much. So I'd be curious to see, as people maybe become clearer on, you know, what do they think and what patterns have they noticed, that they're living, in contribution. So not in regret, and things that they're doing so lovingly and well, maybe even, and maybe that they're talented in, or their expertise, or things that people appreciate about them. So the more they're doing that, I wonder, if regret would arise as much. And when it does, maybe they can just hold space for it, as residue, as something that's normal, that all of us, have at moments. Yeah. What about you? What's a tip you could offer?
Yeah, I think that part of what you say, I mean, all of what you say, I agree with, but just that last bit, especially, I think that don't be afraid to feel into regret. It's not a bad thing. If it's showing up for you, then it has meaning, and it's showing up for you because it's asking for you to look at it. And so, if we can cultivate a practice to be with the discomfort, which we do a lot in our irest practice, it could be really helpful for us to, not to push the regret away. And instead, what if we can accept that it's here and maybe take a closer look and say, okay, what is regret trying to tell me in this moment? And then knowing then better what it is that you need to heal or resolve within yourself, whatever that regret is bringing up for you. It's trying to tell you that, hey, there's something you haven't quite resolved here, or maybe something you don't feel quite comfortable with, or something you need to integrate about yourself. So what is that? And then the other thing is that, really coming back to that trust that things are already unfolding just as they were meant to. So instead of thinking that, oh, things should be different or could be different, or it would be better if it were different, and it's my fault that it's, things have happened in a certain way. Yeah, you've certainly contributed to the situation, but are you responsible for all the variables that brought that situation together and for things to have unfolded in a certain way? I would say that, we probably think too highly of ourselves to think that we, have created all of the things that affect everyone and ourselves and everything around in that situation. And it could come across that way sometimes, if you really were the center of the conflict, right? But at the same time, is that it's happened. And if there are certain things that you can do, that you need to do or should do them. But we can't change the past, and perhaps trust that whatever that happened, whether you were the one who hurt someone or somebody hurt you, that that was what was meant to happen in that moment. And maybe it was that very thing that helped you to be or have that drive or motivation to go into a new direction where you can be supportive of your community, of your family, or the people around you. Or if you were the person that may have hurt someone, that perhaps you don't know the impact that you created in helping to shape their lives for better or for worse. We don't, karmically speaking, we don't understand why certain things happen to certain people, but perhaps it makes me feel better to trust that, okay, well, that was the process that needed to happen, even if I don't understand why it did. And so maybe that helps us to let go of some of the grasping and holding on so that we can move forward in a way that's constructive.
I think that's wonderful advice. And we'll have to see what people share and see how it goes for them. Thanks so much,
Yeah.
Dora.
Thanks, Jen.
Yay.
Bye now.